Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and of course, the listening public at home and those following us online. Today, 20th of October 2016, you join us for yet another post-cabinet media conference, and this afternoon, we will be addressed by the Prime Minister himself, Dr. the Honourable Keith Rowley. I now invite Dr. Rowley to the podium.
Good afternoon, members of the media. Good afternoon to the listening public. As you will be aware, we have been, for the last few weeks, very engaged in the business of preparing the national budget. That budget was delivered very successfully, and then we went through the processes of the Parliament, which saw the budget debate ending, and we've had 5 days of examination of the line items, and that came to a conclusion yesterday evening. So the budget is now on to the upper house, having been successfully passed in the lower house. But my main reason for coming to you this afternoon, over and above providing an opportunity for you to raise with me one or two matters which might be of concern to you and the national public, which I would want to address through you, is to inform you that I have today advised the President to issue a writ for the local government election, and that nomination day for local government would be Monday, November 7th, and local government elections will take place on Monday, November 28th. So that now puts us into another period of heightened activity. One of the main considerations for having the election as quickly as possible to get it out of the way is so that the country can focus on the business of coping with our challenges, whatever they might be, and to get the whole question of elections and ups and downs and distractions out of the way. And hopefully by the turn of the new year, we would be able to focus very specifically and in undistracted way on the development program, which we hope would be in full gear going into the new year and would allow us to make our best efforts to bring about some economic growth in the economy, and also to face down this persistent criminal onslaught which makes the news on a daily basis. So we want to get the elections out of the way and get on with the other business of management of the state's affairs. If there are any questions you have, I would take them now, and I would be hopefully in a position to respond to most of them, if not all of them. Yes?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jason Shields from
I'm not hearing you.
Jason Shields, 91.9 FM.
Thank you, yes.
There has been talk for years about local government reform. Is your government, how involved is your government in trying to bring about such reform?
Very involved. As you know, in our manifesto coming into the general election of 2015, we committed ourselves very firmly to wide-ranging local government reform. And in keeping with that document, which has been adopted as government policy, we spent the last year conducting a number of exercises of public consultation. In fact, we've done 14 consultations, one in each local government area, and that was done under Minister Franklin Khan's ministry. And this had tremendous response from the public, and after that consultation was over, the inputs from the public have been digested, and the legal framework against which the drafting of legislation which would capture what the new local government arrangement would be. That work is very ongoing. The local government office, those who have been in office, their term has come to an end. We had always committed, and we said so publicly on many occasions, that we will not postpone the elections, but we will go into the elections, and the operations will continue, and we work towards introducing new local government operations into the next term. We will have the legislation go through the parliament. Hopefully it will be passed successfully, and then we'll prepare and execute this program of local government reform, which is quite wide-ranging and exciting as we go forward. So we have worked on that, and the calling of the election in no way obstructs that, but in fact advances the process.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon.
You've announced a November date for the parliament elections. The opposition leader said her understanding was it would have been sometime in December. Was December ever considered for the local government election?
Well, the calling of election in Trinidad and Tobago is a matter for the Prime Minister and not for the opposition leader. So it's part of my duty, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability, and as effectively. We really could have delayed this election for 90 days into January. But again, you know, there are other things we have to consider, not the least of which is the Tobago House of Assembly election as well. That is also due. And then there's the new fiscal year started October 1st. We're going through a very challenging period in managing the country's finances. We've just had a budget which has some substantial downward pressure. There are issues around there. Issues in the energy sector, there are issues of trying to maintain and create employment. So all of these things, if we get the elections out of the way, then we can focus better on them.
Is as far as you know, is the EBC, the electoral machinery, voters list, and so on up to date, ready for this?
Yes, we have the commitment from the EBC. The EBC has said publicly, and we have no reason to doubt them. They've done a very good job going forward in the other elections. We've had a season of elections in recent times, 6 or 7 elections of one kind or another, and the EBC has always distinguished itself in being able to conduct these elections well. And I have no doubt that the statements they've made that they are ready to conduct the local elections, that they will do so. And of course the law sets certain time frames for nomination day and certain minimum days and certain maximum. So we are working within good experience.
Another matter, Prime Minister, there's an issue with the WTU National Petrotrin. Is this something that was a serious concern for the government?
Well, any disruption in the labor force, private or public sector, would be of concern, and especially if it's in an area as like Petrotrin, where our national revenues can be negatively impacted. It appears to be a problem within the operations of the company, which can, hopefully, I expect that kind of thing would be dealt with so that it doesn't cause any disruption to our production and revenue earning stream.
Are you satisfied, the Cabinet satisfied that there is a contingency plan for dealing with issues of strike action of this nature at Petrotrin?
Well, there are always contingencies, and we will rise to the occasion if the occasion calls for it, but I hope that doesn't get to that.
Just one other thing, Prime Minister. The issue of the Attorney General and photographs and so on, there have been calls for him to be at least step aside or removed until investigations are completed. As part of the Cabinet, how do you respond to such calls?
As soon as I am told what offense the Attorney General would have committed, I will consider calls coming from any quarter. But I would not be exercised by the ramblings and the rants of a dysfunctional opposition leader.
Mr. Prime Minister, good afternoon. Urvashi from CNC3. During the statutory meetings, it was revealed that there was a cut in security for schools. And from some quarters came the sentiments that it would compromise security of the schools. So could you respond to that?
Well, I would respond by saying that Trinidad and Tobago, as a nation, has had its revenue stream considerably reduced. I don't think I'm telling you any tales here, or if this is news. This has been a statement made for months. It's an undisputed fact that we do not have as much money as we would like to do all the things that we would like in all the areas that require money to do what has to be done in those areas. That is a fact. That is the situation. And therefore, as we set out to allocate how we will spend what monies are likely to come in our direction, the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Finance had the job of making reductions across the board. And of course, every area, it can be advanced that this money is not available here, or don't cut here, or don't cut there. But the bottom line is that because of the circumstances of a reduced revenue availability, we have had to make reductions in expenditures in health, in education, in foreign affairs, in the Prime Minister's office, in Parliament, in the President's office. We as a people have had to make provisions for spending less. And I'm not surprised that from here, in some areas, some persons will say that their area is more important than other areas, and so on and so on. And if we don't have all the money we need, we'd be exposed. But that is simply a matter of the circumstance. I do not think that by reducing expenditure in the way we have in that particular case that you mentioned, that we are in fact exposing ourselves to any increased insecurity. I'll tell you why. What the examinations have shown us, being forced to do so by the pressure of the lack of revenue, we are surprising ourselves by finding the significant waste that exists within the system, and that many of the options that were taken for granted were not the best options. And on top of that, the frequency of corrupt practice that might be expensive. What we've been trying to do is to minimize those instances and get the benefit of that. So while we may not have all the money we may need for the perfect situation, the reductions as they are do not in themselves create, unnecessary hardships.
Mr. Prime Minister, we're talking about schools here, we're talking about the main meeting place for young people, and we're talking about a place where young people get engaged in...
But I'm saying that it is possible to have security based on what we have allocated. It might not be what they've been accustomed to. But at the end of the day, we have to make do with what we have available. There's an availability problem. And in some instances, even if it was available, you may find that how it was being spent was not the best way to spend it. There's no malice in the allocation. And if, on the other hand, there are extraordinary exigencies, then we'll adjust them as we go along. But clearly, the budgets could not remain stagnant.
Mr. Prime Minister, I understand if situations arise, you can adjust it as it goes on, but we can't wait for something to happen in a school then to put more security.
Why do you think that something is going to happen because we have not spent what was spent last year? Suppose I ask you to talk to the doctors in the hospital. They'll make a similar case about the medicine in the hospital and the nurses and the caregivers. And if I talk to the defense force or the police, they'll make a similar case. Everybody's area is very important and most important to them. But the bottom line is we have had to make expenditure reductions even where we think that some more money might have been required. We just don't have the money to spend in every single area as we were doing along the way. So therefore, the cuts, as you see them being made, that's how we manage what is available. And all of us in all our areas will have to do with a little less. But it is wrong to assume that because you don't get what you got before, that apocalyptic developments will take place. And starting talking about the children and the areas, we will do all that we can to protect our children. But there are some attitudinal arrangements that have to change, because some of those attitudes cost money. And if we just change the attitude, it's a big saving there. And I'm not saying about the children, I'm saying across the board.
Mr. Prime Minister, on the topic of online taxes, questions have been raised as to whether there will be a threshold, and as well as if medical supplies will be exempt from that online tax. Are you in a position?
I have not heard of any exemptions that the Minister of Finance would have made. It's a purchase that carries a tax of 7%. It's a revenue-raising measure and other benefits that may come. But the bottom line is we've discussed that at length, and again, the Minister of Finance may not have endeared himself to the purchasers, but we have to understand that there's a purpose behind taxation. The very people who might be objecting to the tax might be the biggest beneficiary of the outcome of the collection.
Ian Mason, CTV. Yesterday, there was a call from the head of the Tobago Regional Corporation asking for assistance for the fishermen who would have been affected by the swells in the Caribbean Sea, including infrastructure work. Did the cabinet discuss that?
No, that matter wasn't discussed this morning because we have not yet had a proper report as to what the outcome of those swells have been, and it's relatively, as a matter of fact, most persons would have heard about that this morning. We monitored it yesterday, but I've seen that there have been some damage, but the extent of the damage has not been properly assessed to determine what might be the response from the Exchequer.
Just for you to repeat something I asked earlier.
Is it that I'm getting a little deaf? I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Sorry, I'm going to shout, and then it seems like I'm
Yeah, well, if you raise the voice a bit, I don't want to answer a question that wasn't asked. So-
When returning to an earlier point, earlier matter, when you spoke in the Parliament about the issue of how the photographs and so on got into the public domain, you attributed, you raised concerns about this defense force. You spoke about whether soldiers had leaked photos and so on. You expressed concerns about the security provided to you by the state. Do you still stand behind those comments, or have you had a chance to revisit that matter?
I spoke very clearly, and I do not intend to repeat myself on the matter. I choose my words very carefully, and I am not entirely irresponsible. So I'll leave that with you.
Even as the opposition is saying that your criticisms of the defense force were unwarranted.
That is the opposition story. I saw the headlines in the newspaper and I listened to the opposition, but they don't speak for me, I speak for myself. And I mean, you can analyze what I say in whatever way you wish. I don't expect the opposition to say otherwise, so that doesn't faze me.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good afternoon.
This is for 102.1 FM. Just as an adjunct to the question that Mr. Tiwari asked, there's news out there that the American Chamber of Industry and Commerce, today at least, we got that news item, was asking for a consideration of a drop in the online tax. So maybe it hasn't probably come to your attention?
Not me. The Minister of Finance would have taken on board all that was said, starting with the complaint that there was no consultation. But of course, this is the Minister of Finance who said many months ago that this would be done. I think the Ministry of Finance was a little tardy in putting out the order, which went out this morning, it coming into force today. I think the Ministry of Finance would have apologized for that. The order should have been out before today. But in terms of it being changed, in terms of the level of the taxation or postponement of it, I don't think that is on the cards.
Going forward, three issues, of course, would be taken or confronted head-on by your government: crime, unemployment, and provision of basic social services. I mean, given the belt tightening and the stringency of economic positions here, how does your government see this road ahead in the context of, no let-up in that crime, unemployment, a possibility of it rising, and basic social services being cried out for by as many people in our society?
Well, let us start with the social services. It's an undisputed fact that in Trinidad and Tobago, the level of social services provided by the government of Trinidad and Tobago is not inconsiderate. In fact, we have quite a basket of social services provided and still available to the section of the population who should qualify for those services. And if I go through the list, you yourself will be very impressed. And those services are still available. There might be a little reduction here and there in terms of the quantum of those services. Support for unemployed is still available. I distinctly recall when I was in the cabinet and we had the concept of CPEP as a business incubator to generate micro business. In fact, if my memory serves me right, the ministry at the time had a nomenclature called micro enterprises. And that had moved from 400 million to 700 million. That is not an inconsiderate move. And now that we are without the revenues similar to when it was 400 million, it's only common sense that one of the things that we have to do is to bring it down from 700 million, being encouraged by the lack of revenue. But the opportunity for the program to remain is still there. And that's only one example. There are a number of other programs in the country. The food card, which we have found tremendous abuse in, OJT, tremendous corruption and fraudulent practice, which we are now addressing. So these are some of the areas that we are grappling with right now, and they're coming to you thick and fast as areas where there's benefit to be had by re-examining them and making the most of what's available. Crime, that is the one that is really most frustrating, because it is not for want of resources why we are in fact in a record-breaking and intractable situation with crime. We are spending significant sums of money in our response to the criminal element. Right now, national security, whose job it is to protect and serve us in this area of concern, is the single largest chunk of the national budget. So it cannot be that we are not providing resources. We have national security agencies whose job it is to respond to the criminal element, either to stop it, to find who's doing it, and to prosecute those who are doing it. That's in place. And we just have to admit that we are not effective. 17% detection for homicide is wholly unacceptable. Across the Caribbean, there are other countries with 40% and 50%. In the UK, is 95%. 17% is not acceptable. And it cannot be that we're simply saying that it's not enough money, because we have consistently as a nation provided more and more money in our attempt to provide ourselves with security and to confront the criminal element. The bottom line is the results are unsatisfactory. So we have to keep working at it, and this government is doing that, trying to get the best of the investments we are making in human and other capital. And of course, we are trying to get the population to agree that they too have a role in assisting the police. Policing is largely based on information. Policing without information makes the job of the police officers much more difficult, if not impossible. It is information, its availability, and a willingness on the part of those who know what is going on to share it with the police, and for the police to build the trust to receive that information. These are some of the biggest challenges facing Trinidad and Tobago today.
Mr. Prime Minister, would you say, for example, that unemployment is a contributing factor in the context of a rise in criminal behavior?
Of course it does. It does, because some people can act improperly out of desperation, and some people see opportunities for choosing crime as a way of life. There are, as you mentioned, that side by side with unemployment that, according to you and to some other points of views, side by side with unemployment as a driver of criminal conduct, you have situations where persons who have jobs can't find people to take those jobs. So it's not because you are unemployed that you become a criminal.
In the context of putting this on a ladder, there's let's say the influx of foreigners into our country. We wouldn't call to identify Venezuelans, Nigerians, what have you, Jamaicans, what have you.
We have.
Are you all seeing it as they also contributing to this crime wave in our country?
They're not the cause of our crime wave. I mean, but I have no doubt that we have had examples of persons who have come into our country from other places getting involved in the same way that people from our country have gone to other countries and got involved in crime. In fact, a number of the deportees who have come back to us are persons from our country who have gone abroad and got themselves involved in breaches of the law. They're all contributory factors. There's no single factor. The social systems, persons seeing opportunities, business opportunities, individual opportunities, social pressures. It's a plethora of things. And by the same token, there's no single action that will cause it to be eliminated. It has to be a consistent, sustained, common sense approach that gives us an opportunity to respond effectively to those who are involved in crime, particularly those who choose crime as a way of life.
So just two final questions for me, Prime Minister. What's the update on those Trinidad and Tobago nationals from Turkey? And you must be delighted, the government must be at the outcome of the Venezuelan freeing of our 5 nationals. And I take it that those two remain, I will think.
With respect to the persons in Turkey who are supposed to be Trinidad and Tobago nationals, our foreign minister met with officials from Turkey in Washington recently. We raised this matter. We have no new information coming out of that area on these people. Information has been very hard to come by, and the last information we have is that whoever they might be, they are somehow or somewhere under the control of the Turkish authorities, and it has been very difficult to determine what the intentions of the Turks are with respect to these people. The ones who are in Venezuela, finally after almost 3 years, the Venezuelan legal process has apparently ended, and the last information we have is that the clearance for their repatriation is progressing one way or the other, and those matters are being dealt with through a foreign ministry, and hopefully this matter will come to an end, and we would respond appropriately within the laws of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Prime Minister, Julian Neves from Newsday. You mentioned CPEP. I just wanted to get, what is government's, well, we know we had Minister Khan speaking about the reduction in CPEP, and as you mentioned, there is a reduction across the board. But what is the ultimate philosophy towards CPEP and these so-called make work programs?
Well, the programs like URP and CPEP are meant ideally to be temporary interventions for persons who have been unable to find jobs in the mainstream economy. Unfortunately, over time, they have become full-time expectations of some people and persons who see them as satisfying their needs for employment, if not even an entitlement. What we do is to maintain these programs. There is a place for these programs, especially now, where there is some stagnation in the economy. But as we create additional jobs in the development program, we expect that some of these people will use those opportunities to get better paying jobs, because you must remember that these minimum wage programs are just barely above minimum wage programs, right? And we really don't want to encourage people to make these minimum wage programs their ambitions in life. They ought to be seen as temporary along the way in life, and hopefully the economy will provide them better opportunities for better jobs, better paying jobs. But in the meantime, there is a role for these programs in bringing about relief, especially to persons who are managing households, who are head of households, and who have children, and they have the responsibility to ensure that these children are clothed and fed. So these programs play that very vital role. And we will try to make sure that we minimize corruption within these programs, and that some production of some kind comes out of them as the expenditure takes place.
On my second question, Mr. Prime Minister, I just want to get an update firstly on the local response to the situation in Haiti and also the CARICOM response. I know that was being arranged.
Well, we have not been able to come up with a CARICOM response. It's been extremely difficult to come up with a CARICOM response. We try to do that, but CARICOM sometimes is more difficult to corral. However, there have been a number of individual country responses in Trinidad and Tobago, as you know, at the national and the NGO level. We have intervened. We are all contributing in what way, and very soon what we have collected here in goods and finance would be on its way to the Haitians. There will be a longer period over which whatever else might come up will go. So if a CARICOM position comes up, we will participate. If not, Trinidad and Tobago will participate on its own, as we are doing at the moment.
Prime Minister, just following up on my colleague's question concerning CPEP, just the general issue of that, reductions in expenditure on programs like that, and the issue of unemployment, the opposition, others outside the Parliament have been raising concerns about the issue of unemployment increasing. But then how do you balance that if you cut down on those programs, if there are people who are going to lose jobs, and the concerns about criminal activity out of
Well, I don't know why you're trying to tie it to criminal activity. I thought I said to you that we are aggressively moving on the development program where a number of job opportunities will arise, and as some reduction takes place in one expenditure area, we expect that expenditure elsewhere would create opportunities. You're focusing on CPEP, but I don't want us to focus on CPEP as the response to reductions in the budget. Because if you do that, you have to automatically talk about abuse. There has been some significant abuse in that program as well. Let me give you an example. In Diego Martin West, where I'm the MP, we live in Diego Martin West with two CPEP, two contracts. Superior have 12. So, clearly, that was not how the program was meant to be. And that was the program that spawned Rudy's rapid response, remember? But the program was really meant to be a nursery for small business where the government fund these contractors who will attempt to grow themselves into self-sustaining business. We seem to have lost that expectation. So while the Treasury funds the program, there's an expectation that they will not remain as another kind of URP, but we will be happy to see them grow into small business and then even grow to big business. That was the basis behind CPEP, not to create entities of or enclaves of political machinations.
And also, as you speak about the issue of big business projects, do you think that the atmosphere, the situation of getting big business to invest, some major foreign direct investment type project or things of that nature, there have been questions about whether or not there has been enough incentive, not just in the oil sector, but in the non-oil sector, to have that high level of investment.
Could I tell you something? This conversation has gone on for decades, to the extent where now there are so many incentives, much of which not being utilized, that if I ask you now, what incentive that there is that is not being given, you'll have difficulty answering, because you will find that by and large they're all given. And then the question arises, what are they being used for? And I don't think that if one does a proper scientific analysis of the package of incentives in Trinidad and Tobago and see what the incentives have generated, you can come to any conclusion other than the incentives have not been as motivational as one thought they would have been when they were given. Right? You're hearing, and you hear that from all the sectors, because these are now close to being cliches, you know. We've put an incentive out in this budget saying that agro-processing is tax-free. All right, let's see who's going to say, you know what? Let me go and invest in agro-processing and my earnings will be tax-free, and that's a good thing. Because to do that, to have agro-processing, you have to have agro-production. You have to produce something to process it. So therefore, you have to work with the farmers to produce the beans or the mangoes or the whatever, to process it. And if you do that, then what you earn is tax-free. Who is going to come to the harvest? We wait and see. But don't be surprised if next year you hear the government didn't do something, the government didn't do that. There are some things that the government can do and should do and must do. But when the government makes an offer like that, we expect that there would be some takers because the incentive is there. What better incentive is there if you have money to invest than to be told that if you invest here, the earnings will be tax-free?
What about, let's say, projects now? Of course, past Prime Minister, the late Mr. Manning, had a vision of an aluminium smelter as a major foreign direct investment type project. Does your administration have something on that scale?
Yeah, I tell you what we have on that. We owe the Chinese a lot of money on that. We owe the Chinese a lot of money because that aspect of our attempt to diversify our economy using what we have to do that, which was using our energy to go into aluminium, which would have been a new industry, equals diversification. It was rubbished by some people who flatly refused to acknowledge that in so doing, we would have removed ourselves from the potential for involvement in this industry, and also we would have incurred significant expenses. As I speak to you now, we are engaged in discussions with the Chinese about our liability to the government and agencies of China to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars resulting from the closure of that project. And we are also reviewing and very close to a decision of whether Trinidad and Tobago should return to Alutech, which was the industry that was meant to use aluminium to create motorcar wheels and other aluminium products at ETech Park. One interesting thing that came up recently as we reviewed our position on Alutech is that we had the Economic Advisory Board review the proposal to go forward with Alutech. And what that board did was to look at what has happened in the industry, motorcar wheel supply to the world motorcar wheel industry. And what jumped out at us is persons or countries that went into the business after us, what they expanded into, how they expanded, how they grew their business. And they now have a business doing very well. And we have to ask ourselves where we would have been had we started our business when the government of the day had said that's the business we should go into. People who went into the business after us or who expanded their production after us, they're doing very well now in that specialized area of selling aluminium wheels to the motor industry. Would we here had reason to shut it down, kill it off, incur expenses in the process, and stay here and talk about it? So right now, in answer to your question, very soon we'll conclude our discussions with the Chinese, and it might not be too early to tell you that it's my intention to, as part of all of these discussions and so on, to visit China next April. Hopefully by then we would be in a position to have softened our position and to have some cooperation with respect to how we treat with the Chinese situation. Thank you very much. One more question.
Could you describe at this time your relationship with His Excellency the President in light of what seemed to be a war of words between the two of you all over a matter of meeting with him and the National Security Minister?
I don't know that I should respond to that because you are accusing me of something that I am not guilty of. I am not engaged in any war of words, and from this very podium, I've made it quite clear that I would not be engaging in any such. And secondly, as to answer your question more directly, as far as I'm aware, there's an Office of President and there's the Office of Prime Minister functioning very well. Thank you very much.